Welcome back to Success Through Connections. Today I have a wonderful guest. I'm really excited to get into his topic. It's Scott Talan, and he is a professor about communicate. He talks about communication. He's got a very impressive background. He's got degrees in Harvard University, at University of California, and Stanford University. I'm impressed already. Forget the rest of it. So let me give you a little background.
I don't know if I could get into any of those today without upping up my high school and college grades and game.
That's okay. Well, Scott is our social media expert. He talks about personal branding, social media. He's worked with the United Nations, Harvard University, the March of Dimes. And he used to be a reporter and writer for Good Morning America. And back in the day, I think it was 2000, he covered the story here in Florida, where we're from, when it was the recounting. I believe that was the Chad incident. I remember.
Chad, Bush v. Gore. And
yes.
That was for Capital News Service out of Tallahassee, all the NBC stations in Florida. Florida, as the late, great Tim Russert said.
Well, in addition to all of this, he was elected to the city council and also mayor of Lafayette, California. Wow. He's a TEDx speaker, and he really is going to address the topic of personal branding. He's spoken to many conferences about social media best practices. So, Scott, welcome to our show, Success Through Connections.
Thank you, Zelda. Fun to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Today, I want to really hone in on the topic of how to attract the attention of the media and influencers. That is just such a big hot topic these days. So let's dive in if you're ready.
It is a hot topic.
It is.
Interestingly, a number of surveys have shown that for young people, that's one of their top career aspirations, is to be an influencer. You know, you used to have been like pro athlete or something. Now influencers as the top way to go. So I see this. I teach at American University in Washington, D.C., and you can see the interest and the use of students of social media sites. I have a MediaFast essay assignment where the students try and go 24 hours without media. A lot of them think it's just the phone or tablets or computers, but it's really media is everywhere. The signs, the music, people showing, people texting. So we can't escape it. But the real idea of social media being so popular is because humans are social. Yeah. So this is only going to increase because the very nature of being human.
One of the things which I saw actually maybe a day or two ago on social media, I think it might have been TikTok for all I know. And the influencer talks about, like affiliate marketing and most of it is you see these young people like you're teaching and they're promoting a product and such. And she made a comment of something that I had been thinking about, which was who's out there talking to the 50, 60 and 70-year-olds. They're out there still. They're still active. Somebody should be out there addressing their needs and what they like. And I thought, well, that was really interesting because the things that the 30-year-olds are buying, I'm certainly not going to be buying. So
there's a lot here, including for decades, the broadcast networks really focused too much on youth. They would always talk about the cohort that was 18 to 25, and they've sort of realized the errors of their ways. And when you look at the resources and the boomer generation being the wealthiest generation in the history of the world, they're realizing there are obvious targets that should be addressed. And then it gets into some very granular stuff. So maybe TikTok might make sense, but maybe not. Facebook would be the biggest country on the planet. Most of my students aren't on it. If they're on it, it's purely for family reasons. Mm-hmm. But for people that are 50, 60, 70 and more, Facebook is the go-to.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's because the social stuff, their high school or college friends, their family, their life friends are there and they know they can reach them. And I just saw a recent piece that was very interesting title that said, the one remaining place on the internet for social media that seems human is Facebook Marketplace. And if you think back real quick, just newspapers had classified ads. That's how they made a lot of their money. Then comes Craig Newmark out of San Francisco, creating Craigslist. It was always supposed to be for San Francisco, but it became so popular that knocked the classifieds away from news and hurt the news industry. But now, I mean, Craigslist is still there, but Facebook Marketplace, to me, is the number one place to go to buy or sell something. It is incredible what's there. And this is why this article said it still feels human and real, because people are doing real things, transmitting goods and services via the marketplace and Facebook, because again, it'd be the largest nation on earth.
Absolutely. I'm on Marketplace a lot. I've been getting into a new hobby. And so I'm trying to buy some used equipment, do infused glass. And I'm like, I'm not going to spend thousands of dollars on this. Let me go on Marketplace. I'll find one. And so, Marketplace is wonderful.
This is an example to your question about, for those folks who aren't in their 20s, 30s, or 40s, that you have to really think through the platforms and places that they are. Mm-hmm. So this gets into sort of marketing 101.
Yes.
Who are your audience? Who are you trying to reach? Where are they? Where can you reach them? And it's not just one channel. There's multiple channels, but it's not like be everywhere. That may or may not make sense. Usually it does not make sense to be everywhere.
So let's face it, social media, all of these different channels, they're the game changers for today's world. And so I'm wondering, for the business owner that wants to up their game, not necessarily the beginning business owner, but somebody who's a little bit established and all that, where should they start to get noticed in media? Is it, like you said, figuring out who your client is and go into that? I mean, where should they start?
So that's actually where they should start. They should talk to their customers and clients, and they could do this just by conversation. They could do it by email. They could be more formal and have what's called a focus group. And just ask them is like, where do you get your information? Where do you go online? You could even do it somewhat interestingly, as sort of an experiment, and just watch where people go on their phone when they're in the office and just sort of see, like, or ask them, where do you go when you're on your phone or online, and listen to those places. I'm guaranteeing for, older audience, Facebook would be one. Could also be potentially YouTube. YouTube would be number 2 for search after Google. And it's interesting to note that Google bought YouTube years ago. It's also interesting that YouTube initially was going to be a dating site. That was the initial concept. And if you think about it, that was the initial concept. Because it didn't turn out that way. And that's because the users often determine things beyond the creators. Facebook never expected to be the world's warehouse to store photos. Well, that's because we started putting photos, and that's why they bought Instagram, because Instagram was all for photos and images. So back on this question, I would talk to the customers and find out, where are you? Where would it make sense for me to be as a business? What would help you? And depending on the business, YouTube might be the only and best place, because it's a physical business that's shown by video very well. Video is so strong because it replicates real life better than any other medium, period. The downside is it takes time. It's linear. So that means this is why shorter videos like on TikTok have been very popular, right? And Reels have become more popular. So if you were running like a car repair business, pictures might work, but wow, showing your video of how your cars get repaired, showing the shop, showing a fixed car and a customer, there's a number of different ways in this example with video that would make sense. So it really does become business dependent, and that business really, to do the research of talking to their customers, hey, just where do you get your info? Where do you think I should be?
I see that a lot, actually, Scott. I see a lot of these videos because I watch them all, even though I'm not in my 30s, obviously. But I watch, and the ones that are interesting are the ones who are showing the backstories. Here's how I get it done. And I'll just use I won't use the real estate, which I'm a realtor, but I'll use my hobby. So I saw somebody the other day actually picking up a piece of stained glass, and they were saying, I'm going to try this, that, and they were just talking about it, and they were telling how the backstory of how they were creating this beautiful piece. And then they were saying how the next video said how the manufacturer was actually sending them samples of the glass for them to try, because obviously they're gaining traction on social media.
So there's a couple of things here. One is, while you want to talk about your business, you also want to be careful and cautious of not overdoing it, especially if at some point it seems like you're really reaching for topics that are interesting, and that at some point the backstories become too granular and too So what do? Well, what you want to do is think about your audience and what else they might be interested in. So you're not always only talking about your business, you're talking about things that are of interest to your audience. So let's do talk about real estate, right? So you might have a current home for sale, one coming for sale, right? Okay, fine. But you could also do something and talk about neighborhoods and maybe coffee shops or parks or roads or things that might not connect directly to a sale, but certainly are of interest to people that are your audience. Does that make some sense?
Absolutely, it makes
So
sense. Absolutely.
I don't want to forget this, Elda. Here's the nice part is it then makes it easier for the business owner to come up with content ideas when they're not always focusing on them and their business, which can be a little bit too much sometimes. That they give other things that are of interest to the audience that may be directly or semi-directly related to the business itself.
So that makes total sense.
Sorry to jump in again.
No, no, no. I want you to jump in all you want.
Back to the car repair example I brought up, right? Well, one thing at some point that car repair could be like the car washes he takes his cars to, or the cars he repairs, and go through the car wash. And it would be a great video because you just put a microphone on, you're talking, you're driving, like, yeah, after we finish the work, we like to take them to the car wash. Here's the ones we use. Here's why, and then go into what's a clean car and maybe even a tip about being careful with some car washes because they can scratch the paint. What kind of wax? So it's not about the car repair service at that point, but it's very much connected and it's very much, I think, very helpful potentially to the audience.
Absolutely. So, I mean, and when you mention car washes, I think of my son who has a side gig. He's a car detailer. It's like details cars for people that don't want to go through those car washes and scratch up their cars potentially. So, yeah.
So if your son was doing social media, video would make sense. I also think pictures would make sense, some of the Instagram. Mm-hmm. And what he could do is take a car he's detailed and it'd be in like some parking lot at some mall somewhere and go, here's a detailed car and here's the car that's next to it. Can you see the difference? And even go, underneath the wheel well, underneath the car, look at the grill and just go, yuck, look at these bugs on this dirty thing. Look at the detail. So it's a contrast that could best be shown by media. In this case, I think photos and or video.
When you talk about media, it used to be back in the day when you wanted to get the media's attention, it meant, like you saying, the newspaper, and you'd send out a press release. Do people even do press releases anymore? And where would they send those to?
They do. And I teach a class at American University in PR writing and press releases. So that's still, even though it's an imperfect medium, because it just relies on text for the most part, it still has a place because there are newspaper reporters or local bloggers that still they know what it is. We all know what it is, right? If you have a website, you can also then put the news release on the website. So I wouldn't just rely on the press release anymore. You'd have to, and hopefully have more with it, but there's still a place for that, including trying to pitch a news organization, a newspaper, a news station, or again, bloggers who are covering that industry wherever they might be located and putting it on your website, but again, with other mediums as well. So the press release is not dead. I'm surprised it's still alive, but it is not dead. And
yes,
its death is premature.
My sister was on a webinar the other day, and she said she was listening to them, and they were telling her to send out a press release, and that's what got my attention. I was like, where are you going to send a press release? It's not like the news. Yep. There's no newspapers. So so there still are newspapers, and there's also media lists that will tell you which news editor or news reporter to go to. So let's say we're in the Orlando area. I mean, there's the Sentinel and there's other news, smaller regional neighborhood news. There's also free newspapers. We tend not to think about these things, but they're still alive. They're there. They're physical artifacts you can pick up. And they are always looking for content. So they probably would love press releases, right? Because they don't have as big a staff. They don't have the resources. So this is a little bit about knowing your industry, knowing your area, realizing it's a mix of sort of older things like a press release and newer things like perchance like TikTok. It's a mix. So, Scott, how does one, if they want to do these print media type things, or really even just even getting on the news, how do you position yourself as newsworthy?
So you have to first understand who are the readers or watchers of that news outlet. So you have some idea that you can then confidently say, okay, this is why my thing would be of interest to them. So you have to understand a little bit of the newspaper. You can, again, just do your own little field research. Ask people that read the newspaper, why do you read this newspaper? What sections are the favorite? Why do you watch this newscast? My father, Jack Talan, turning 100 years young this May, watches David Muir almost every night, Monday through Friday, right? And he just thinks he can trust David Muir. David Muir is relatively calm, cool, and collected. He's not getting too excited. He lets the news speak for himself. So that gives me an insight as to who else might watch David Muir on ABC News every night. So in this context is then to think about what is new or newsworthy. Is your business part maybe of a trend that you've got some evidence or you read something elsewhere, and then you can say to your local person, hey, this trend is happening in other parts of the country. I do this here. I'm just making this up. I do like boutique pampered pet care, which means blah, blah, blah. I'm just completely, coming up out of the blue with this. But if that trend was happening in like Southern California and you're doing that that would be newsworthy. And that might even be a perfect segment for a TV talk show, a morning talk show, which is lighter news, more people-friendly news, more consumer news. So again, you have to understand these different types of news places and what might work for your business and what the news is in terms of what's happening and latching yourself onto a trend.
So
For example,
what makes a pitch stand out, and what are the biggest mistakes that you want to avoid?
so number one thing is don't use the word pitch.
Okay.
Reporters don't want a pitch. They want a story.
Okay.
And then
So
you would
let me
say,
rephrase that. What makes a good story that stands out, and what are the things to avoid?
okay, so great, reframe and rephrase. So what stands out is something that is of interest and or benefit to that news audience. So is it something they didn't know, i.e., literally the definition of new? Is it something that is of practical benefit that they should be aware of? And when you think about the nature of the word story and human beings, and this is why I think we're still one of the reasons we're atop the animal chain is that we're storytellers. We communicate. So what makes a good story? Well, you have characters, okay? You have some plot and details, and you have conflict. And then with the conflict, you have a resolution or a solution, right? So Romeo and Juliet, two young lovers, conflict is the families don't want them to marry. Their solution was to commit suicide. They'd rather be dead than be apart. It was set in Italy, right? So there's this sort of off the cuff. Most of us are familiar with Romeo and Juliet. So to bring it something closer to home, sunshine in Florida. If you don't have a garage or a carport, then your car's paint might be getting dull or peeling because of so much sun all the time. Well, if you were a car detailer, like we were talking about earlier with your son, maybe there's a product out there that's new that does a job that you only have to apply it once a year. You can do it only with the rag. Like, I'm already interested and I have a covered garage. Like, if it's simple and there's a way to do it, and I know it's going to help with sun in this example, okay, literally we don't want to say the pitch word, the story idea would write itself like, protecting your car from the hot, strong Florida sun. Here's a new product. Here's how to use it. And you keep it short and sweet. Don't make a big, long thing, because news reporters, people that run websites get a lot of ideas thrown at them. There's a lot they're doing. So short and sweet, set up a problem, offer a solution,
Address the
you have to
pain.
think, address the pain and provide a way to reduce the pain.
Yeah.
Good point. Good
So
word.
when you talk about products, because some people have, retailers definitely have a product. Everybody has a product of some sort, even if it's your own services, you have a product. So let's talk for a second about these influencers. They're all about products and promoting these products. What is a good approach for a small business to connect with an influencer to get their attention?
So, number one thing is to follow and understand that influencer, see what content they're sharing, and try and understand their audience. See the comments, see who else is sharing, and then decide, is that influencer good for you? So it'd be more like watch and observe what this influencer is doing, understand them. And then if it makes sense, you would reach out to them with a message, a DM, and say, hey, I've been watching your stuff. Here's what you've done. Here's something that I think would be of interest to your fans and you, and then send them a description, a link, or whatever it is. So it's really more being an anthropologist and observing this social media influencer, or plural influencers, to understand if it makes a good fit for what you're offering.
So there must be some.
And then reach out and connect. Then reach out and say, hey, here's something I have.
So before you even approach the influencer or even the media, are there some effective ways to start to build that relationship with the journalist and the influencers before you even need them?
So I think it'd be challenging for a business owner. This is what PR professionals do. And there might be some point where a business would hire a local PR company for sure, because they have those relationships and they can help tailor the message. So that's depending on the size of the business and where the business wants to go. Hiring a local communications or PR firm might make a lot of sense. If you're not yet there or don't have the budget for that, then you really got to make sure that, take the time to understand. You might have to, hire a college student from a communications school and say, hey, I want you to put some research together for me. I'll pay you for this project. I'll pay you by the hour. And that actually might be a really good way to go, is because you have someone who's using these social media sites regularly, who can do the analysis and then say, here's what I saw, here's what I recommend. And every business knows you have to invest. There's no way to have a cost-free business, either time or money, let alone emotion and heartache and all those other things that
Usually
go into
it's
a small
both
business.
time and money.
Correct. And your sort of emotional stake in it, right?
Yeah.
So I would say, if you can't hire a local PR firm, then hire a local college student from a communications PR program, and explain your business, meet with them. You can do it on Zoom. You never have to meet them in person, just all this electronically, and say you want a report. And you could even ask for them to come up with some example social media content that then would give you ideas. And then at that point, the research project's done. You could decide to hire that student to do it. And I've had plenty of people over the years that have done that, where they'll hire a student to do their social media for them for a campaign, a product launch, a new introduction, whatever it is.
And it might be that you contact the communications department of the universities, because they would know the students there that are good at the video, good at the whatever. So, yeah.
Great example. Like literally say, Professor, I understand you teach this and this. I'm a local business person. Here's the business. I'm offering a paid, you call it internship or paid job, paid opportunity. Would you mind sharing this with your students? Like most professors, I hope, would be willing to do that. I know I would, because you're giving student real life experience and they're getting paid. I think it's tough if you're not paying them. But I don't know if some.
I don't think that exists anymore.
Well, it does less and less. It's still there.
Yeah. I think it's a great idea. I know I've watched on social media where they say, how did you get that great job? And they go, well, while I was in college, I was interning. And then they hired me after college. So, yeah.
I just talked to a student, Avery, who was interning at a place in New York, was part of a big PR conglomerate over the world. And she got her job. She's graduating in May, and she'll be working there from the internship. So that's a little bit different. That's more formal. Students can legally intern. It's different than volunteering. They're not supposed to be taking someone's job. They're supposed to be learning something new. So there's like these rules and regs with interning. But in terms of just a small business hiring someone, that's a much easier thing to do, working with the professors or the dean or whoever. And just, I have a paid opportunity for students. I'd be happy if you could share this.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Is there Can you give me any examples of some smaller, not the giant big companies, but some of the smaller companies that are doing a really good job of getting the social media attention? And what can we learn from that?
There's too many to go through. So what you should do is let's pick a different type of business than we've talked about.
Okay. Most of the people that I know are in service related businesses.
Okay, give me one example.
Insurance. It just popped into my head. Insurance. A
I love
mortgage.
I love insurance. I talk about it in my class because it's an amazing concept, and we're fortunate to have it. And I've had a recent student. He was working for an insurance company while being a student. So love the example. Love insurance. So in that case, it partly depends on the industry. Are they part of like a biggie like State Farm or Geico, or do they have their own sort of local regional one or smaller one? That would depend. But I would just find out. I would just literally search, maybe even use AI and have a conversation with AI. Hey, I have a small franchise insurance company based in Central Florida. I'm looking for some examples of best practices or award-winning social media campaigns for smaller sized insurance, offices. See what it comes back and then fine tune it. And I just listened to someone this weekend do a whole dialogue that was very similar to this in terms of a back and forth. It was for real estate, but it was fascinating to listen into this conversation with an AI bot.
Yeah.
But wow,
I love AI, and I have those conversations all the time. And it honestly, Scott, it blows me away. It's like I'm really talking to the person.
Correct.
It's crazy.
And you can really fine tune stuff. So this is why this example would work very well, because you could keep fine tuning back and forth, and it might take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but so what? It's worth the time to have this conversation. And then you could ask, hey, create campaign, create a social media plan, and then you could work with the student or whoever, or someone in your office in this case, and then comes into execution of it.
Yeah, I have a friend, she's an artist, and I tried to talk her into using one of the AI tools. And instead, what she did was the other night, she says, hey, my friend, my AI expert, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. Can you please help me out? So I'm like, sure. Gave her answer, went on to the AI tool, and here's your answer. I'm a brilliant person.
This reminds me of about 25 or so years ago, where people would ask, do we really need a website? Because it was so early that people didn't know. The answer seems obvious now, right? And then, social media, do we really need to do this? Well, the answer seems obvious now. I think AI is very similar, that there's so much there that we need it.
I feel like if you're not on social media now, you really have missed the boat, because social media is the least expensive form of advertising. You used to have to go to the newspapers and pay for all that. You can do it for free.
So that's why it's not even advertising. It's like social media promotion. It does take time investment. Depending on the content, you might have to invest. There is also paid social media. And so that's something for your small businesses I would also look at, is paid social ads, depending on each site.
Tell us your take on that. There's the paid social ads and the sponsorships. Give us some information on that.
So I would do another AI dialogue and say, hey, I'm a small pet grooming company in Florida, and I want to do paid social media ads. Here's who my customers are, and see what comes up, or even do Google search, or maybe someone's written about it. But paid social media, it can be a very cost-effective way, because you can limit how much you spend, you can really tailor and adjust, and you get a lot of feedback that's superior than the old days of newspapers, where it would just be in the newspaper and you may not know how it worked. You can really get a lot of data and feedback. So paying for an ad on social media, and it's surprisingly easy to set up. You can definitely do that on your own as a small business person.
Here's a question about a little bit different for you is, let's talk for a second about crisis PR. Okay. How do you prepare yourself so that if something happens, somebody posts something negative or something along those lines, you can prepare for the unexpected negative media coverage?
So crisis involves two things that make it different than a problem. And that involves severe risk to your reputation and what I would call temporality. There's a time aspect where this is happening now, it's still going on, and you can't wait. You have to respond. And forget even news coverage, right? That's a real, if it gets to that level, whew, but it could just be an inaccurate review, a comment. You know, we came into this restaurant and we had to wait 20 minutes for a table. Let's say that was even true. Well, if you see that, then maybe it's because two of your staff called in sick, and you would just explain that. So the basic answer is to respond soon, if not ASAP right now. And depending on the context, you might not have all the answers, but you can still say, we're looking this out. We're checking this out. Thank you for letting us know. We don't know right now. We're going to get back to you. So at least you're responding and not letting it sit there. So rapid response is the key. You have to be forthright. And depending, again, on the business, the person involved, the CEO, maybe a video makes sense. You know, so it just depends a little bit in terms of the delivery of the communications, but sooner beats later with crisis, because otherwise, the more you wait, then it builds up and becomes even more severe.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, that's great advice. That's really great advice. So one of my final questions that I would love to ask you is for the business owners who are listening in and they want to attract that media attention or the influencers as fast as they can, what's the one thing that they should do when they stop listening to this podcast today? They should immediately start doing what?
They should watch different influencers and find the ones that make sense for them and their business, and maybe start engaging, depending on the platform, commenting, sharing, learning, and then seeing about reaching out to that influencer and saying, hey, would this interest you? Would I do interest you? And you might have to either explain it by text, or maybe you can show an image or have a little video clip or something. So depends, again, the nature of the business, but you don't want to waste your time and you don't want to waste the influencer's time. So you want to spend the time understanding that influencer and if they're a good fit for you and your business.
But one thing that I like to tell people is, and you tell me if I'm wrong, I don't think I am, but maybe, don't just like something, make a comment, share it. That's how you get it out there. But when you just like it, it's worthless.
I'm making a note here for class, so I'm looking down. But what I'll say is, when we go to parties, if you're just sitting in the corner talking to no one, that's similar to you just watching and just consuming the content. You do, Zelda, have to do what you just said. You really should comment, share, like, and that means engaging. That means going over and talking to someone, saying hello, having a conversation, etc., getting out of the corner of the party and getting engaged with others. That's why you're there. Otherwise, you're just a consumer, which is fine, but that's just sort of entertainment. It was not going to help your business. You might learn something. That's true. You might learn something, but other than that,
you're trying to make the connection. That's not, I have a course online, a course that I offer. It's called the Ultimate Networking Playbook. And one of the things I stress is when you're on LinkedIn or one of these channels and you're following somebody, to engage, to make a comment, you'll get their attention.
So LinkedIn, we haven't talked about, but I had a whole lecture on this topic in my personal branding class last week. LinkedIn no longer considers itself a job site. It is a publishing site. And so if you think about that, there's a lot of content and there's a lot of things. There's LinkedIn groups where by company or by industry, you can be engaging and sharing with others, let alone your own business page. So just you should in the future have, if you haven't already, Zelda, a guest just talk about LinkedIn for business. I think there'd be a lot there.
If you've got a connection for me, I'd love to do that.
Well, I have 6,000 connections on my LinkedIn. I bet you can find someone, Zelda.
I'm going to go looking because I would love to have somebody about that. So we're just about out of time. Any final words or advice, how our audience can reach you when they want to reach out and reach Scott?
Very findable. I've been on social media from its early pioneer days, early on LinkedIn, the early 2000s, when Twitter started to come out at South by Southwest. YouTube, I had my YouTube channel. Facebook, when you needed, I was in grad school at Harvard, and you needed a Harvard email address and you needed an invitation from somebody already on Facebook. And they were really restrictive and gatekeeping. They had no plans for what it became. So I've been early on these sites, so I'm very findable. I'm on TikTok, even though I don't really create content. I'm on Instagram. I'm very findable. If that person can't find me, I think they've got a problem that they need
Go
to
to
figure out.
LinkedIn. That's how I found you. It's like,
There you
this
go.
is my
Proof's in the
guy.
pudding.
This is my guy.
Well, thank you. This has been enjoyable, and I applaud you for taking the effort to have this podcast, which is not easy because you've got to find the right guest, make sure they can speak on the topic you want. You've got to do research to get the questions out of the conversation. But this is an example and a lesson and a reminder for your listeners and watchers is that creating content takes time and effort. There's no free lunch.
People just think I'm just putting you on a video call and that was all. There's research that goes into it. And there's people in the background, so yeah,
Correct.
it's a lot more than
now,
just.
we've recorded this interview. You still need to have to host it, distribute it, right? And you had to learn about social media, about myself to ask the right questions so we have enough to talk about as opposed to 10
Yeah.
minutes you're running out of time,
Yeah.
or you're done. I mean, you're
Yeah.
done.
Exactly. Well, Scott, I thank you very much for your time today and wishing you luck on all your endeavors. You've been great. I hope we can get you back again sometime soon.
No promises. The future's a funny thing, but I'm so glad to be here today and I can't wait to watch this, Zelda.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it. Bye now.
You got it.